They sentenced her to the mines for a death she didn't cause, then handed her to the cursed king instead. 18 winters of silence. A wolf kingdom that called him broken. A high priest at a marble pulpit whispering he was marked by the moon goddess herself. One human healer. One forced bond. One candlelit night that undid a lie 18 years long. She found something living inside his ear. Segmented. Alive. Silver runes etched along its spine. He hadn't spoken in 18 years. His first words were for her. I can hear your heartbeat, burning temples, howling packs. A dead Luna's grave, a green ribbon journal, silver chains at a priest's wrists. An alpha king rising from exile with the voice they buried. He pressed his forehead to hers by the dying fire. When he comes for us, I open the door. The lamplight flickered inside Ravenspire Fortress, and Allara Vain's silver tweezers came out of the alpha king's ear, slick with dark blood. Something wriggled at the tip. Something with segmented legs and a shell that caught the candle glow like wet obsidian. 18 years. That was how long this thing had lived inside Kale Draven's skull. 18 years of silence. 18 years of a kingdom whispering the word cursed behind his back. And now it was writhing in a jar of silver wine at her elbow, and the man on the table was opening his mouth for the first time since he was 19 years old. They say the devil hides in small places. Allara had never believed that. Not until tonight, his throat cracked around the first sound. A rasp. Then a shape. Then 3 words that reshaped a kingdom. I can hear. His own voice startled him. His face changed, went slack, then broke, then reset. He tried again, softer, as though afraid the sound would leave him. I can hear you. She could not answer him. Because her own throat had gone tight, and because a healer at a bedside did not speak first when her patient had just discovered his own voice. She only pressed a clean linen against the rim of his ear and watched a man who had been buried alive inside his own head for 18 winters come back into the room. His hand rose, slowly. Fingers found the place behind his ear where the small dark thing had lived. He pressed once, gently. Then he looked at her. Really looked. For what felt like the first time since a courthouse 3 weeks ago had shoved them together at a signature. Your heartbeat. His voice was gravel and smoke. I can hear your heartbeat. She almost laughed. She caught it in her throat. Because the truth was very simple and very unromantic. That's because you're touching my wrist. He looked down. His fingers had closed around her wrist without either of them noticing. He did not let go, and she did not make him, because she understood something in that moment that would take the rest of the night to say out loud. That whatever had put that thing inside his head 18 years ago was still walking free in the kingdom below. That the beetle in the jar was not the end of the story. It was the receipt. Which meant the real story was only beginning. And it would begin, she knew already, with the name of a man she had not yet dared to say out loud in her own head. A name in gray robes. A name at a marble pulpit. A name that had spent 18 years telling a kingdom that this good man deserved his silence. That name was going to hear its own weight before the winter was out. She was going to see to it. 3 weeks earlier, Iron Fang Kingdom. The High Court of Elders. The great hall smelled of old wolfsbane and older grievances. Allara sat on the petitioner's bench, hands folded, spine straight. She had learned long ago never to slouch in front of wolves. Slouching told them you were prey. And Allara Vain had never been prey. She was a healer. A human healer in a kingdom of shifters, which was almost the same thing as being nothing at all. Except that she had delivered 57 pups and 31 children in 6 years. And every one of them still drew breath. Everyone until Lady Seraphine Blackwood. Elder Ragnar Stormhold looked down at her from the high seat. 68 winters had carved his face into something that looked half wolf, half granite. He was fair as the old law allowed, which was not the same as just, Mistress Vain. This council has heard the petition brought by Lord Thorn Blackwood regarding the death of his mate on the 3rd night of the harvest moon. The petition alleges negligence. She kept her face still. She had attended Seraphine's labor. She had watched a young Luna bleed out on her own furs while her mate paced the corridor drunk on plum wine and rage. She had done everything her mother had taught her, everything the old midwife scrolls had taught her, everything the smuggled human medical texts she had read by candlelight for a decade had taught her. Seraphine had died anyway. The pup had died with her, and a woman was dead who should not have been, behind Allara. At the back of the hall, High Priest Malachi Vorn shifted in his robes, 55 years old. silver at the temples. A voice smooth as river stone. She could feel him watching the back of her neck. He was the one who had planted the whispers. He was the one who had leaned into Lord Thorn's ear at the funeral rite and murmured that a human hand had no right on shifter flesh. That moon goddess herself had turned her face away from the birth. He had said it kindly. He had said it with sorrow in his voice. That was how he said everything. However, Elder Ragnar continued, "This council is aware of certain irregularities. Given the complexity of this matter and the absence of definitive proof of negligence, this council is prepared to offer an alternative to imprisonment at Silverhold." Her heart hammered. Silverhold. The mines beneath the Black Mountains, where difficult women were sent to break rock until they broke themselves. Where humans lasted, on average, 11 moons. She had treated 2 escapees over the years, in secret, at her back door. She knew what came out of that place. And what did not. You have 3 sunrises to enter into a bonded marriage. Should you do so? And should your mate accept the writ of guardianship, this council will dismiss the petition and close this matter. Marriage. To whom? She was 28 winters old, widowed by a human trader 2 years back, who had married her for a plot of orchard land, and never once looked at her with anything you could call warmth. He had died of a lung fever without ever asking her about a book she was reading. In Iron Fang. A widowed human healer was less than nothing. She was rumor with a shape. The council has already identified a suitable alpha. A murmur moved through the hall like wind through wheat. She turned her head. Kale Draven stood near the back. Tall, weathered in a way that had nothing to do with age. He wore the black leather and dark furs of the northern packs. His hair was cut short at the sides, longer on top, streaked with early gray, though he could not have been more than 37. His jaw was clean, his hands hung loose at his sides, his eyes met hers for one heartbeat and slid past. Kale Draven, the cursed king. Everyone in the kingdom knew the name, the Alpha of Ravenspire Fortress, who had not spoken in 18 years. Whose first Luna, Allara, had died screaming in a birthing bed 3 winters ago, whom High Priest Malachi had denounced from the marble pulpit as a man marked by Moon Goddess herself, whose very presence in Silverhold, the capital, had been ruled a violation of sacred ground, and this was the mate the council had chosen for her. She looked from Kale to the elder, to the smooth silver-templed priest at the back of the room. She saw the shape of it all at once. A cursed king who could not defend himself. A human woman who could not defend herself. A courthouse that could dispose of both problems in one afternoon. Have you ever watched a good man be blamed his whole life for something that was never his fault? Because that was what she was looking at, which meant that whatever answer she gave in the next breath was not only for her. It was for him, too. Whether he knew it or not, she met the elder's gaze. Her voice did not waver. "I accept." The bonding took place that afternoon in the same hall. No garlands, no pack witnesses, no pretense that this was anything but a signature on parchment. Malachi Vorn was pointedly, deliberately, absent. Elder Ragnar performed the rite himself. His voice moved through the old vows quickly, as though even he could not stand the taste of them. Allara spoke her half in a voice that carried. Kale Draven said nothing. He inclined his head at the correct moments. When Ragnar reached the words that bound their scents together beneath Moon Goddess, Kale pressed his wrist against hers. His skin was hot, his pulse steady. It was the pulse of a man who had learned to be calm because the alternative was madness. "You may seal the bond," Kale hesitated. For one long moment she thought he would refuse. Then he leaned down. His mouth brushed the corner of her jaw. Quick, dry, cold as the winter air outside. The kiss of a man honoring a contract. Nothing more. They left the hall through the servants' passage. Lord Thorn Blackwood was waiting on the wide stone steps. 40 winters, face blotched with drink. His pack tattoo, a black boar on his throat, moved as he swallowed. He stepped into her path and his breath was wine and something sourer than wine. "This isn't finished, human. You killed my mate. You'll answer for that. Cursed king or no cursed king." Kale Draven did not speak. He simply stepped between them. He did not touch Thorn. He did not draw the short blade at his belt. He only stood there and let Thorn look at him, at the width of his shoulders, at the calm that came off him like cold off a lake. Thorn took a step back. He muttered something ugly and turned away. Allara had never seen a man silenced by silence before. She followed her new mate to the cart. The road to Ravenspire took 4 hours through the pines. Snow had already begun to catch in the branches, though the harvest moon was barely spent. She watched the kingdom she had lived in for 6 years peel away behind them. She watched the world grow narrower, colder, wilder. She studied him when she thought he was not looking. His face had been carved by wind and grief. His hands on the reins were scarred at the knuckles. The kind of scars a man got from splitting his own kindling for 20 winters, because the servants he was allowed had been chosen by someone else. Every 40 seconds or so, his jaw would clench, then release. A small involuntary tell, pain, somewhere behind his ear. She was almost sure. She tried speaking to him once, to test the story the whole kingdom told about him. She asked how much farther. He did not turn his head, did not so much as blink, deaf. Just as they say. Except when the mare stumbled on a hidden root, he corrected the reins before the animal had finished shifting weight. When a pine cone dropped onto the wagon canvas behind them, he did not flinch. When the wheel struck a rut, he steadied the load a full breath before the shock reached her hip, deaf to sound. Not deaf to the world. His body was still listening. Just not with his ears. She filed that away. She had a habit of filing things away. It was, her mother used to say, the only reason she was still alive at 28 in a kingdom that did not want her to be. They rode on. Halfway up the ridge, she caught him, glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. A brief look, assessing. Not the way a man assessed a wife, the way a wolf assessed the strangeness of a woman who did not seem afraid of him. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of a great many things. Silverhold, the mines, the pulpit at Silverhold, what the winter would cost, what her old midwife's kit would cost to buy back, whether her hands would ever stop feeling the shape of Lady Seraphine's dying wrist inside them. She was afraid of a great many things. The cursed king was not on the list. She would understand, months later, that this had been the first useful thing she had done for him. To simply sit on a cart next to him and not be afraid. He must have felt it. Because a mile before the fortress came into view, his shoulders eased. Not much. Enough. A man who had ridden with fear beside him for 18 winters had noticed, in the last hour of a long day, that this time it was not there. Ravenspire Fortress appeared as the sun sank behind the black mountains, larger than she had expected, stone and dark timber, glass in the windows, which meant coin or craft or both, a courtyard, a stable, a training ring worn smooth by decades of use, and silence. The most complete silence she had ever stood inside. No neighbor smoke, no neighbor road, just Ravenspire and the pines and the last light of day bleeding on the ridge. Kale helped her down from the cart. His grip was rough. Impersonal. He led her inside without ceremony. The great room was clean, almost monastic, a hearth already laid, a long table with 2 chairs, a wash basin, 2 doors on opposite walls, both closed. On a shelf above the hearth stood 3 books. She recognized the spines from a distance, a human anatomy text, a treatise on herbal fevers, a slim volume on the wolf's throat and its diseases, a cursed alpha king who could not speak, who kept medical books, who had bonded a stranger to save her from a mine. She did not understand him yet. She was going to. She was very good at understanding people once she got them inside a doorway. Kale pulled a small slate from his coat pocket, chalked out 3 words in a careful, close hand. You take the west chamber. I will sleep by the fire. She read it, read it again. She had expected many things from this night, not this. Her tongue moved before she thought. That isn't necessary. He watched her mouth. He could not hear, but he read her. He shook his head once and wrote again. It is already decided. Some part of her that had been braced for something worse loosened. Something else, quieter, unbraced too. She had been prepared to endure a stranger's hands. She had not been prepared for a stranger's courtesy. All right, thank you, he nodded. He went to build the fire. She carried her small trunk into the west chamber, a narrow bed, a patchwork quilt, a cracked shard of mirror, 1 window facing the pines, and on the table beside the bed a 4th book, older than the others. The cover was cracked. The title had been half rubbed off. She lifted it. Advanced Study of the Deaf Ear and the Diseases of the Skull. She sat down on the edge of the bed. Her hands were steady. Her stomach was not. A cursed alpha king who owned a text on skull disease. A man everyone said was broken. Who was, she suspected, sitting at his own hearth this very moment in more pain than he had ever admitted to another living soul. She had felt useless since Seraphine. She had not felt useless in the last hour. That was, she realized with a small startled twist, the first change of a long night. She would not sleep for hours. Instead, she lay in the narrow bed with the 4th book open on her chest. She listened in the deep quiet of a mountain fortress, to the small sound of a stranger moving carefully around his own hearth so as not to wake her. She listened to him build the fire. She listened to him rinse a cup at the basin. She listened to him drop a piece of kindling and pause a full 3 heartbeats before setting it right, as though he had been startled by his own dropped kindling. Which was strange for a deaf man, because a deaf man could not be startled by a sound, unless he had felt the vibration, unless he had been trained to feel every vibration, because vibration was the only kind of listening a man in silence had. She filed that away too. She was still filing it away when the crash came from the great room. Heavy, wet. The sound of a body meeting stone. She was moving before her mind had caught up. Her robe was around her shoulders. Her feet were bare on the cold flagstones. Her hand was already at the door. She did not know, as she pushed the door open, that she was about to change the course of a kingdom. She only knew that a good man was on the floor behind that door. And she was, tonight, the only healer in the world who had already decided to look. Kale Draven lay on the floor beside the hearth. One hand was clawed against the right side of his skull. The other was locked around the leg of the table, hard enough that the wood was creaking. His face was slick with sweat. His teeth were bared. Fine tremors ran the length of him. Her healer mind cut through fear like a blade. She knelt. She caught his wrist. His pulse was fast, thready, wrong. She tilted his face toward the lamplight. His right pupil was blown wide. His left was normal. Pressure inside the skull, sudden, bad. Her eyes went to his right ear. In the small honey glow she saw it. A thin dark trickle at the rim. And inside the canal, something that had angles a natural thing should not have. She brought the lamp closer, held her breath. The angles moved. Her stomach flipped. She did not look away. She grabbed the slate off the floor where it had fallen. Her chalk stub was gone. She reached blindly for a piece of charred wood at the hearth and wrote across the slate in scorched, ugly letters, "Something is alive in your ear. Let me take it out." She held the slate close to his face. His eyes came open, dark, bloodshot, full of a suffering so old she could feel it come off him like heat. He read the words. He read them twice. He looked at her. Really looked, the first time, and she saw the calculation move behind his pain. He was thinking of every healer who had come before her, everyone who had lied to him, everyone who had shrugged, everyone who had spoken of curses. He was deciding whether he could bear another. He nodded once, barely, which was, she would think later, the bravest thing she had ever seen a man do. She moved. Fire in the kitchen hearth banked hot, water into the copper pot. Her small kit from her trunk, the fine silver tweezers she used for splinter and glass. The curved forceps she had bartered a lamb for 2 winters back. Silver, all of it. Silver did not corrupt shifter flesh the way iron did. She had learned that early. She sterilized the tweezers in the boiling water, then over the flame until they glowed, then set them on clean linen to cool, warm olive oil into a small clay bowl, warmed further, drawn up into a slender dropper. She had used this trick twice before, on children with beetles in the ear. Insects hated oil. They came toward the light. Kale had dragged himself into the chair at the table. His head was in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. When she touched his shoulder, he lifted his face. She pointed at the table, mimed lying down with his head turned. He understood. He stretched himself along it on his side, right ear up, his cheek against the wood. He closed his eyes. She positioned the lamp. She spoke, though she knew he could not hear her. The words were for herself. "This is going to hurt. I am sorry. I am here." She dropped the warm oil into his canal. 1 drop, 2, 3. It pooled. It went dark, then darker. As something inside the darkness shifted away from the heat, then toward it, they waited, 5 minutes. She counted them by his breathing. His hands were fisted on the table. The knuckles had gone the color of old bone. She did not tell him to loosen his grip. She understood that his grip on the table was the only reason his skull was not moving. Then she saw it. A segmented body eased into the mouth of the canal, black as spilled ink, glossy, wet with oil and old blood. Legs. She counted 6, barbed at the tips. She picked up the fine tweezers. Her hand did not shake. The first attempt failed. The thing recoiled deeper, faster than she had expected. Kale made a small choked sound in his throat, a sound he had probably not made out loud in 18 years. She switched instruments, the curved forceps. She could see what she thought was the joint behind the head, if it had a head. She got purchase, she held, she pulled. Slow, even. And she had reset a shoulder once for farrier. This was that same pull, steady pressure. Do not jerk, never jerk. Kale's hands ground against the table. His body shook. He did not move his head. The thing came free all at once, 2 inches long, 6 legs, something that was almost a beetle and almost not. Segmented, alive. Its legs clawed at the air as she lifted it into the light. It was so black it seemed to drink the flame. And along its back, catching in the lamp glow, running from thorax to tail, was a fine, deliberate line of silver. Not a color, an etching. Runes. Small and precise. The kind a jeweler carved. The kind a priest carved. She dropped it into the jar of silver wine she had prepared. It thrashed. It struck the glass twice. It went still. Its legs stayed curled inward, as though it had died holding something. The silence in the room was so complete she could hear the hearth breathing. Kale sat up. He moved slowly, as though he were relearning how his body was supposed to hang together. His right hand rose. His fingers found his ear, touched the rim, pressed lightly at the bone behind it. His mouth opened. The rest she already knew. The 3 words. The voice startling him. The wrist and the heartbeat. What she had not expected was what came next. He looked at the jar on the table, at the thing floating in the silver wine. His eyes tracked the fine silver line along the beetle's spine. He was, she realized, still enough of a healer's son to know what he was looking at. His voice, when it came again, was very quiet. That was put there. She nodded on purpose. She nodded again. He looked at her, not with fear. Something colder than fear. By a man with silverwork in his fingers, yes. By a man with access to the temple archives, yes. By a man who has spent 18 years telling a kingdom I was cursed. She did not answer. She did not have to. He was doing the arithmetic in his own head. She could see the columns lining up behind his eyes. Allara, Seraphine. The mind collapse. The holy man who had come to his bedside on the 3rd morning. The writ of exile. The pulpit. She watched him finish the sum. He looked up at her. His voice was steady, which was worse than if it had shaken. I want the name, but I want it done cleanly. Or he will bury us both. Then we begin with what we can prove, which is the woman I could not save, because her story and his story are the same story. And her body still knows it. He held her eyes for a long moment. Then he did something she had not expected. He reached across the table. He set his hand over hers, briefly, warm and calloused and steady. Not romance, not yet. Something older than romance. Alliance, tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, she agreed. Dawn was gray at the shutters when she finally slept. She did not go back to the west chamber. She curled in the great room chair by the hearth with a blanket over her knees. Kale sat across from her with his back against the stone. He would not lie down. He was, she understood, listening, to the fire, to the wind, to the far small sounds of a fortress that had been sealed inside his skull for 18 years and was now suddenly, terribly, wonderfully alive again. She slept in fits. Every time she came half awake, he was still there, watching the jar on the table, watching the door, watching her. She woke to the smell of coffee, real coffee, dark and burnt at the edges, the kind traders brought up from the southern coasts once a season. She emerged from her chair blinking. Kale Draven was standing at the stove. He turned when she came in, and he heard her step. She could see it in the small delay before he made himself look casual about it. Good morning. His voice was already stronger than the night before, a little smoother. He had been practicing while she slept. Good morning, Alpha. You saved my life. You do not have to call me Alpha. Not until I have another name for you. Kale, Kale. He smiled. It was still tentative, a muscle relearning its own use. But it was a real smile. He put a mug of coffee in front of her. He set out eggs and dark bread and a small dish of goat cheese. She watched him move. He moved carefully. Every scrape of a pan, every rattle of a lid, every crack of the kindling. His shoulders would tighten and then, deliberately, force themselves back down. 18 years of silence. And now the world was shouting at him. You are going to have a headache by noon, she told him. I have already, then eat, then sleep. Then we start work on you, on your voice, on the runes, on that beetle, on the name we are not saying out loud yet. He set his own mug down. He looked at her over it, Allara, the way he said it. She was not prepared for the way he said it. As though he were testing whether her name would carry weight in his own mouth. As though he wanted it to. Yes. I did not marry you to have a healer. I know. I married you because a high priest at a marble pulpit told my kingdom that a human woman had no business laying hands on shifter flesh. He said it about my Luna once. Different words. Same voice. He paused. He considered how much of himself he was prepared to hand her before breakfast. I thought perhaps you would understand what it is to be looked at and unseen. I thought perhaps you would not lie to me about my own pain. I don't lie about pain. Mine or anyone else's, I know that now. He took a drink. He set the mug down. He nodded once, at nothing in particular, as though he had settled an argument he had been having with himself for a long time. Then we work, late that morning. Wrapped in her fur cloak, she followed him out to the back of the fortress. The snow had come in the night, thin and crisp. He walked without speaking. She did not push him. He stopped at a small fenced enclosure beneath a great blue spruce. Inside the fence stood a single stone. No shaping, no inscription. He had not been permitted to inscribe it, she understood. Not officially. Cursed kings did not get to name their dead. He said the name for her. So the stone would hear it out loud, perhaps for the first time in 3 years. Luna Allara Draven, 20 winters. Beloved, she did not speak. She did not offer condolence. She had learned early that grief did not want comfort. Grief wanted acknowledgement. He stared at the stone. She died in childbirth. Winter of the 3rd year of our bond. The pup was breech. The cord was around its throat. The midwife I sent for was 2 hours late because of a blizzard. By the time she reached us, my Luna had been laboring 19 hours. She died with her hand in mine. I could not hear her ask me for water. His voice did not break. It did something worse. It went even. Malachi stood at the marble pulpit at her funeral rites. He told the assembled packs that Moon Goddess had punished a cursed alpha by taking his Luna. He put the vote to exile me from Silverhold. He carried it. He carried it because he needed it carried. Do you understand? I have thought about that funeral for 3 years, every night, every rest hour. He was not preaching, he was steering, and I did not know why. She thought of the runes on the beetle, silverwork. A priest's hand, she said quietly, I think I might. He turned his head. He looked at her. Not at the stone. At her, say it. He wanted you exiled because a broken alpha king in a far fortress is easier to manage than a whole alpha king on a throne. He wanted you broken because a broken alpha king is easier to explain than a murdered one. A dead alpha requires a successor. A cursed alpha requires a regent. A regent needs a voice. A voice needs a pulpit. He was very still. His pulpit. The wind moved in the spruce above them. A little snow slid off a branch and made a soft sound like a page turning. Allara? Yes. You are the first person in a long time who has spoken plainly to me. I want you to know I heard it. She could not answer that. So she did the thing she was best at. She reached across the fence and put her hand flat against the cold stone above his dead Luna's grave. She stood there with him. She let him have the moment. She did not try to be part of it. She only made sure he was not alone inside it. They walked back to the fortress in silence. Inside, on the long table, the small jar caught the noon light through the window. Silver wine, black shell. Fine silver etching along a curled spine. Waiting, she said. We will need better proof than one beetle in a jar. We will get it. He will come for you when he learns you can speak. Let him. He will come for me first. Kale Draven, Alpha of Iron Fang, stopped in the middle of the room. He turned toward her. There was something in his face she had not seen there before. It was not tenderness. It was not gratitude. It was older than either, and much more dangerous. His voice was still hoarse. But it was steady. He will find that inconvenient. 2 days later, Roran Ashfell rode up the ridge. He was 35, broad in the chest, dark hair tied back at his neck, an old Ashfell pack tattoo curling at his wrist. He was Kale's captain of arms, which was to say he was the only wolf in the whole kingdom of Iron Fang who had refused for 18 years to leave Kale's side. Ashfells did not abandon a bloodline they had sworn to. Ashfells died first. Allara had heard of him. She had never met him. She stood on the porch with her arms folded across her cloak and watched him swing down off his horse and climb the fortress steps 2 at a time. And she understood in the first 5 seconds why Kale had kept him alive. Loyalty came off him like weather. He inclined his head. Formal, not warm, not cold. Correct, Mistress Vain, Captain Ashfell. May I see my alpha? He is in the great hall. Good. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and something moved behind his face she could not read. Not suspicion, not welcome. Assessment. Word rides fast, mistress. From Silverhold. 2 days ahead of me if the wind is with them. So, whatever it is you have done up here, be very sure it will hold. She met his eyes. She did not blink. It will hold. Then I would like to speak to my alpha, now. She stepped aside. Kale was standing at the hearth when Roran came in. He did not turn. Because he had already heard the boots on the flags. Because he had heard the horse a full minute ago. Because he could hear. Which meant Roran took 2 steps into the room. Stopped. Went very still. Alpha, Roran, that one word. Roran Ashfell had followed his alpha into a mine collapse at 19, had carried him out on his back, had watched him wake up 2 days later and never say a full sentence again. Had spent 18 winters writing his errands, guarding his gates, translating his slate to strangers, keeping his throat between his alpha and every knife. And now his alpha stood at a hearth and said his name. Roran Ashfell did not go to his knees. Ashfells did not kneel to living alphas. He did something more expensive. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pressed his forehead to Kale Draven's forehead. Wolf to wolf, and neither man breathed for a count of 4. Say it again. Roran, how? Kale did not answer. He looked past Roran at Allara in the doorway, and he tipped his chin. Roran turned. He looked at her differently now. Not assessment. Something like awe with a great deal of iron in it, mistress. Explain, she explained. She did not make it dramatic. She spoke like a healer at a sickbed. Symptoms. Findings, method, result. She held up the jar. She turned it so the runes caught the fire. Roran looked at the beetle. He looked at Kale. He looked at the beetle again. Then he sat down at the long table without asking permission and put his face in his hands. Because a captain of arms was allowed exactly 1 moment, and he took his. When he lifted his face, it was dry and it was hard. Alpha, may I speak plain, please? You have kept me at your side for 18 years. I have carried your slate through 3 winters of blizzard. I have killed 2 men for calling you a curse to my face. I have buried a Luna who was mine to guard, and I could not guard her from a fever I could not name. He drew a slow breath. So when I ride back down that ridge and return to Silverhold and stand in the high court of elders and look High Priest Malachi Vorn in the eye, what would you have me tell him? Tell him nothing, nothing. Ride back down that ridge and go to Silverhold and stand in his hall and hand him the sealed writ you were sent to hand him, and take his sealed writ in return, and ride out again. Say nothing. Show him nothing. Not even that you have understood a change in the wind. Roran considered this. He nodded once, then his mouth did something that was not quite a smile. It was the shape a wolf's mouth made before it closed on the throat of a stag. And when the time comes, Alpha, when the time comes, Roran, yes, you will not have to ask me twice. No, Alpha. He stood. He inclined his head to Allara. This time the head tilt was different. It was still formal, but it had earned a new edge under it. A wolf recognizing the person who had fed his pack. Mistress Vain, Captain, thank you. Which was not, she suspected, a word Roran Ashfell often gave. He turned toward the door. He paused. He looked back over his shoulder at Kale. His voice went low. It went private. It went almost human. Allara would have laughed to see this day. Kasel's throat moved. She would. Roran left. The kitchen felt very quiet after the horse's hoofbeats faded down the ridge. Allara set the jar back in the cupboard. She closed the door. She turned around, and Kale was watching her, and there was a new thing in his face she had not yet catalogued. What? You handled him like you handled me. I don't know what you mean. You do, she did. Because a healer at a good sickbed did not soothe. A healer at a good sickbed gave a man the truth in the smallest possible pieces so he could swallow them one at a time without choking. She had done that with Roran. She had done that with Kale. She had done it with everyone she had ever put a hand on. It was the only real trick she had. Kale crossed the kitchen. He stopped a step short of her. He did not touch her. Allara, yes. When this is over, when the priest is finished, when you are free of the courthouse and I am free of the pulpit, he seemed to be picking each word from a shelf, carefully, terrified of choosing wrong on a throat that had only just learned to choose. I would like to ask you a question. Only when it is over, then you have something to fight for, Alpha. I had that before you said it. She let herself smile. Small, fast. A gift she took back before it could become currency. Go sit. I want to look at your ear again. He sat. She looked at his ear. She did not think about the question. She thought about it very hard. The blow fell 3 mornings later. A young rider came up the ridge under a torn banner. 20 at most. Pale gray robe of a Silverhold acolyte. His horse was foamed at the neck. He would not dismount. He handed a sealed scroll down to Allara with a hand that shook and did not meet her eye. Then he wheeled the horse and rode back down the ridge before she had broken the seal. Which told her everything she needed to know about the message before she opened it. Kale came out onto the porch behind her. He read the scroll over her shoulder. His breath was steady on her hair. His jaw was not. The seal was Malachi Vorn's. The words were the temples. The message was short, by order of the High Priest of Iron Fang. in the matter of the death of Lady Seraphine Blackwood. The healer Allara Vain is summoned to the marble pulpit at Silverhold on the coming rest day to offer public repentance before the assembled packs. Should she fail to appear, the high priest will petition the elders to annul her bonding on grounds of fraud and remand her to Silverhold Mines for the term of her natural life. She read it twice. She did not read it a third time. A third reading would have been a small betrayal of her own courage. Kale's voice was very quiet. "You will not go. I will go, Allara. If I do not go, he wins twice. He takes the bonding. He takes me. He takes the only reason you had to speak in front of him. If I go, he has to face me in a full hall. He has to keep his mask on in daylight. He will not risk killing me at his own pulpit. He is too vain for that. He does not need to kill you at the pulpit. He only needs to break you at the pulpit. He cannot break what he has never held." That was the sixth thing she had said out loud in 3 days that she had not planned to say. She was going to have to stop doing that, because Kale Draven had a way of hearing every one of them. He did not answer for a long time. Then he said, and it was very calm, "Then I ride with you. You are still under the writ of exile from Silverhold. Then I will break the writ, Kale, Allara. If a man cannot break an unjust writ to stand beside his mate at her trial, then he was never worth the crown that writ took from him." Her chest did something she did not have language for. She was not going to have language for it any time soon. She said, "All right." They spent the next 3 days preparing. Allara reviewed her midwife's notes on Seraphine's delivery. She added observations she had dismissed at the time, the old bruises, the way Seraphine had whispered, "Please do not tell my mate," under the sound of a contraction. Allara had thought at the time that Seraphine had meant the pain. She had not asked which pain. She wrote it all down now, in her own steady, plain hand. Dates, measurements, angles of old breaks, the precise defensive pattern of a bruise on a wrist that had been twisted, not fallen upon. Kale worked on his voice. He read aloud from the anatomy text. He read aloud from the treatise on herbal fevers. He read aloud until his throat rasped and Allara made him stop. And then he read silently, his lips still shaping every word. Because 18 winters of muscle memory had to be unmade one syllable at a time. Because he did not intend to walk into that hall and sound like a stranger inside his own throat. On the last night before the ride, they sat by the fire. She was checking the pack. He was checking a small dagger he had not needed to check in 3 winters. She looked up at him without meaning to. "Kale, yes, if this goes wrong, it will not go wrong. If it does." He set the dagger down. He looked at her fully. "If it does, I will get you out of that hall alive. I will get you back on a horse. I will get you north to the academy. Master Healer Silwyn has agreed already. Roran has the route. There is a healing house in the far country that will take you in, no questions. You will be a stranger with a new name and a full life ahead of you. Do you understand? You planned this. I planned this the morning after the beetle." Her throat closed for a second. "And you, I stay. I finish it. That is not a plan. That is a funeral. Then it is my funeral. And I have owed 1 to 2 women in this fortress for a long time. I would like to spend it well." She did not answer. She could not. She only reached across the small table and set her hand over his, and neither of them spoke for a long time, and the fire made the only sound in the room. At last she said, very quietly, "It will not come to that. No, because I do not intend to be gotten out. I intend to walk out," his mouth curved. "Small, real. Then walk out we will, outside." The wind rose off the black mountains. Somewhere down the ridge, 3 days' ride south, a priest with silver at his temples was reading a report from the courthouse and smiling to himself. He believed he had just cornered a fat human midwife and a broken king into the last mistake either would ever make. He did not yet know that the fortress had a full plan. He did not yet know that the fortress had a captain. He did not yet know that the fortress had a voice. He would learn all 3 by sunset on rest day. Rest day dawned cold and clear. They rode down out of the pines together at first light. She wore the same plain wool she had worn to the courthouse 3 weeks before, not because she had nothing else. Because she wanted the hall to see the same woman it had already tried and failed to bury. Kale wore black. He wore the collar of the Draven line, silverwork stitched into leather at his throat. He had not worn it in 18 years. It sat there like something that had been waiting for him. The road to Silverhold cut through the wolf country of Iron Fang, past sheep pastures and old milestone stones, and the smoke of packhouses banked for winter. Every packhouse door they passed opened a crack to watch them ride by. Word had gone ahead. Word always did. By the time they crossed the last ridge and saw the pale stone of Silverhold rising out of the valley, the road behind them was thick with wolves. Not enemies, not yet. Curious. Which was worse? Because curiosity could be turned into any shape a good speaker wanted it to take, and Malachi Vorn had always been a very good speaker. They dismounted at the gate. Roran Ashfell was there. He did not greet them. He fell in behind Kale as though he had never left. 2 more Ashfell wolves fell in behind him, then 4 more. By the time they crossed the courtyard, Kale Draven walked at the head of a small silent column of leather and blade. Allara walked at his elbow, and the crowd at the temple steps parted for them without a word, which was not something that had happened to a cursed king in 18 years. She felt Kale register it beside her. His stride did not change. His breathing did not change, but the corner of his mouth did. Just a little. The way a man's mouth moved when he remembered, after a long time, what it felt like to walk toward a door instead of away from one. Inside the temple, the air was cold and sweet with beeswax. The vaulted ceiling threw the hush back down on their heads. Malachi Vorn was already at the marble pulpit, tall, silver at the temples, deep gray of the temple with a stole of moon white at his shoulders. His face was arranged for grief, which was, she thought, the second most useful expression in his repertoire. The most useful was the one he wore when he saw Kale Draven walk in behind her, because for one heartbeat, 1/2 of one heartbeat, Malachi Vorn's face went blank. Not shocked, not afraid, blank. The way a card player's face went blank when the wrong card landed, and he had not yet decided what story his hands would tell to cover it. Then the expression of grief slid back on like a slipper. He knew. He did not know how much. He did not know how yet. But he knew that a broken king had walked into his hall on his own 2 feet in front of his own congregation, and a broken king was not supposed to do that. She filed the blank second away in her mind and set her hand quietly on the parchment inside her cloak. The hall filled. Elder Ragnar Stormhold took his high seat. 2 other elders flanked him. She scanned their faces. One of them was Elder Corvin Marsh, who Malachi had elevated last year. His face was already made up for a verdict. Malachi lifted his hands. His voice was warm honey. Brothers and sisters of the Pax, we gather in sorrow today. We gather to give a grieving mate his answer. We gather to hear the healer who stood at Lady Seraphine Blackwood's bedside answer for what her hands did not do. His eyes rested on Allara. Sad, almost tender. Mistress Vain, rise, confess. Perhaps Moon Goddess will show you her mercy. She rose, because he had asked her to rise. And she was going to give him the rising and take back everything else. High Priest, speak, child. I will confess to one thing. His smile deepened. He had been through 100 of these confessions. He knew the shape they took. He was already tasting the shape of hers. Yes, I failed, Lady Seraphine. The hall drew in a breath as one animal, but not the way you have taught them to believe. The breath did not release. She did not raise her voice. She had learned a long time ago that a hall of angry wolves went silent for a low voice faster than it went silent for a loud one. Lady Seraphine Blackwood did not die of a difficult birth. She died of a torn liver. Her liver did not tear that night. It had been tearing for months. Months of quiet damage that was not caused by any pregnancy in her body. That damage was caused by a fist. She turned her eyes, slow and deliberate, to the front bench, to Lord Thorne Blackwood, who was already rising, already red, already opening his drunk red mouth to shout her down. Her mate's fist. The hall exploded. Thorne was on his feet and coming forward. 2 Ashfell wolves stepped smoothly between him and the pulpit, and Thorne learned in 3 seconds that Ashfell wolves did not move for grieving mates. Malachi lifted his hands. His voice cut over the noise, slander in the temple. Mistress Vain, you dare. She did not stop, because if she stopped now, she was going to lose her nerve, and if she lost her nerve now, she was going to lose the whole game. She reached into her cloak and drew out the small stack of parchment she had prepared for 3 nights running under Kale Draven's hearth, her midwife's notes. Every measurement, every bruise, every date, every private word a dying young Luna had said to her healer in the hours before she died. She held them up on the 17th day of the frost moon. Lady Seraphine came to my clinic. She had 4 cracked ribs on her left side. She told me she had fallen from a horse. Wolves of her lineage do not fall from horses. On the 3rd day of the long moon, she came again. Her left wrist was broken in a way that is only broken by the twisting of a hand larger than her own. On the 7th day of the wolf moon, she asked me, Whether Aluna could be granted a separation writ from her bonded mate on grounds of cruelty, I told her no, because in Iron Fang we have no such writ, and she looked at me, and she said, "Then I will die in that house." The hall had gone very still, not silent, still, which was worse because still meant every wolf in the hall was listening now, not to Malachi. To her, she died in that house. She died of a torn liver. The liver tore under the pressure of a final contraction on old damage that a fist put there. She did not die of my hands. She died of his. She turned. She pointed. Not dramatically. Directly, that man killed his mate. Thorn Blackwood howled. He howled the way a wolf howls when a rope has closed. It was ugly, and it was raw, and it was the sound of a man understanding his own guilt in front of his own pack. He lunged. Rowan caught him at the elbow. 2 more Ashfells caught him at the shoulders. He was dragged back. Malachi's voice was ice now. "The honey was gone, Mistress Vain. You accuse a bonded alpha of murder. On the word of a healer and a stack of parchment I do. On what witness? On the witness of forensic examination. I am formally petitioning this hall for an independent healer's review of Lady Seraphine Blackwood's remains. I have already sent the request north. Master Healer Silwyn of the Silverhold Academy has agreed to conduct it. She rides in 2 weeks. The blood left Malachi Vorn's face. Not much, not for long, but she saw it. Elder Ragnar saw it. She was almost sure Roran saw it too, because Master Healer Silwyn did not answer to the temple. She answered to the academy. She answered to the elders. And she did not lie for anyone. Elder Ragnar leaned forward on his high seat. His old voice was gravel. "Mistress Vain, this petition is granted. On the record, Master Healer Silwyn will examine the remains. This council will hear her findings. No temple hand will touch that body between now and then." Malachi turned toward him with the smoothest smile of his life. Elder Stormhold. With respect, High Priest, this is not your hall today. The whole temple heard it. The whole temple heard the exact moment Elder Ragnar Stormhold. At 68 Winters, in front of a full congregation, put a foot down on the marble pulpit and said out loud that the temple did not run this room. She did not look at Kale. She did not have to. She could feel him behind her, standing very quietly, standing very tall, standing in a hall from which he had been formally exiled for 3 years, standing while no one in the entire room found the courage to name the writ that was supposed to have kept him out. Malachi Vorn found his smile again. He inclined his head. He gave the room a bow that was made entirely of malice under silk. As the elder wishes, Elder Ragnar looked past him. He looked directly at Kale Draven. His voice was even, Alpha King Draven. "Welcome home," the hall breathed. It breathed hard. It breathed like an animal that had just been told a fence was down. Kale inclined his head 1 full inch. Elder Stormhold, Alpha King, which was the 4th thing that happened in the hall that day that was not supposed to happen. Because a cursed king was not supposed to answer with a full voice on a marble floor, and every wolf in that hall knew it. Malachi Vorn's smile did not move. His eyes moved. Once, toward Allara, toward Kale, toward the small hidden bundle at Alara's ribs. He had, in that half-second, done the math. He knew. He knew someone had opened Kale Draven's head. He knew someone had looked inside. He did not yet know what she had found, but he knew, in the way a man who has planted a bomb knows the smell of the wick, that his bomb had come out of the wall. He inclined his head to the elder. He turned. He walked off the pulpit with the grace of a man who has just decided to burn the house before the fire brigade arrives. Allara felt Kale's hand at the small of her back. Not possessive. Steady. As though he had been waiting to steady her since she rose from the bench and had only just now been given permission. They walked out of the temple together. The road home was full of packs. They stared. They whispered. They did not attack. Not yet. Because word had run 3 ways in the hall today, and no wolf in Iron Fang was quite sure yet which of the 3 ways was the winning bet, which was fine. Because Allara Vain only needed them uncertain. She did not need them on her side. Yet. Halfway back up the ridge, Kale reined in his horse. He did not speak for a long moment. He looked out over the valley below them. The pale stone of Silverhold sat in it like a bone in a wound. "Allara, yes. Do you know what you gave me today? Tell me." "You gave me the first sentence of my life that I said out loud in that hall, and no one in that hall could pretend not to hear." Her throat closed. She did not let him see it. She only reached across the space between their horses and set her fingers briefly against his sleeve. "There will be more sentences. Yes, he will come for us before Silwyn rides in. Let him come." She looked at him. The wind moved his hair. His hand on the reins was steady. He looked, for the first time since she had met him, like a man who owned the ground beneath his own feet. She said very quietly, "You look like an alpha king today, Kale Draven." He looked at her. His mouth did the small, real thing it did now. Sometimes, when she was not being careful, "I have had a good teacher," they rode on. They had barely reached Ravenspire when the second blow fell. An old woman was waiting on the fortress steps, 60 winters. Morning gray, hair pulled tight, eyes red at the rim. She stood as they rode up, and she did not curtsy, and she did not bow, and she did not lower her eyes, because she had come to burn her own house down before someone else did it for her. Kale dismounted first. He offered her the small courtesy of his hand up the porch step. She took it. She looked at him the way old women look at kings when they no longer have anything to lose by looking honestly. Alpha King, Lady Morwenna Blackwood. Allara felt the name land in her stomach. Because Morwenna Blackwood was Lord Thorne's mother, Seraphine's mother-in-law, which meant Morwenna Blackwood had raised the man who had killed her own daughter-in-law. Morwenna's mouth trembled once. It set. "May I come inside?" They took her into the great hall. Allara set a mug of hot cider in her hands. Morwenna did not drink it. She held it, because holding it kept her hands from shaking off her wrists. Then she reached into the front of her cloak, and she brought out a small leather book, bound in soft calfskin, wrapped in a strip of linen, tied with a bit of green ribbon Allara recognized from Seraphine's own throat. She set it on the table. "My daughter-in-law kept a journal. She kept it in a hollow book in my library, she told me. Before her time came," she said. "If anything happens to me, Mother, promise me you will take the little green book down before Thorne finds it. Promise me you will keep it. Promise me you will not read it unless you cannot bear the silence anymore." She looked at Allara, not at Kyle. At Allara, "I cannot bear the silence anymore." Allara did not touch the book. "Not yet. Have you read it, lady?" "I have. All of it. All of it. Then tell me first, in your own words. What is inside?" Because a healer took the story from the witness first, before the witness could be shaped by anyone else's questions. Because that was the only way you got the truth clean. Morwenna Blackwood swallowed. Twice. She stared at the mug in her hands. "My daughter-in-law was not faithful to my son. Go on." She was miserable in that house. She was frightened in that house. She was hurt in that house. And she was young. And a man in gray robes offered her comfort. She thought it was spiritual, and then she thought it was more. He is a very persuasive man. He has always been a very persuasive man. Allara did not have to ask which man. Malachi Vorn. Malachi Vorn. Kale's hand closed very quietly on the edge of the table. Morwenna's mouth twisted, but she went on. She became with pup. She did not know whose. She was terrified. She went to him, to Malachi. She asked him to help her. She wrote in that book that he gave her herbs. Herbs to end it, because a scandal in the temple would be the ruin of him. Because a bastard in her belly would be the death of her at Thorne's hand. Because Morwenna's voice broke and reformed like a bone reset badly. Because he told her the herbs were safe. Allara felt something in her chest go very cold and very still. What herbs, Pennyroyal? Black cohosh, tansy. She names them in that book. She names how much. She names when. Allara closed her eyes for one full breath, because Pennyroyal, black cohosh, and tansy, at the doses a frightened Luna in her 3rd trimester would take, when a priest told her it was safe, would not end a pregnancy that late. They would tear a liver. They would tear a liver that was already bruised from months of a fist. They would turn a difficult birth into a bleeding out. They would kill a young Luna in front of her human healer, and the human healer would spend 3 weeks afterward being told from a marble pulpit that the death was her fault. She opened her eyes. She looked at Kale. Kale was looking at Lady Morwenna. His face was extremely calm. His hand on the edge of the table was white to the knuckle. His voice, when it came, was quiet enough to be almost gentle. "Lady Morwenna, Alpha King, do you know what happened to my Luna Alira?" Morwenna did not answer at first. She looked at the mug. She looked at the book on the table. She looked at last up at him. "Old woman to king, mother to father, widow to widower, I have wondered. I have wondered, too, 3 years ago. When she took ill in her final month, when the midwife could not reach her because of that storm. When the fever came, Morwenna's voice was thin and very careful. Malachi Vorn came up this mountain, Alpha King, uninvited. He said he came to pray. My son escorted him. I remember thinking at the time, what a strange courtesy from a high priest. To a cursed king in exile, Kale did not blink. He came into my Luna's sick room. He did. He put his hand on her forehead. He did. And she was worse by morning. The room was so quiet Allara could hear the fire pull at the flue. She heard herself speak. Because someone had to say it out loud, and if Kale Draven said it out loud, alone, he was going to break in a way she could not repair. He has taken 2 Lunas from you, Kale. He has taken the mate of another alpha. He has kept a moon-cursed thing inside your skull for 18 years to make sure you could never sit a throne well enough to answer him. He did not build a lie about you. He built a career on you. He built a temple on you. Everything he is because you were quiet. Kale did not move. He looked at the little green journal. He looked at the jar on the shelf where the beetle floated. He looked at the fire. He looked finally at her, Allara. Yes, when he comes for us. And he will come. I would like to be the one who opens the door. You will be? Say it again. You will be, Alpha King. Outside, the wind rose off the black mountains and pressed against the shutters. Somewhere down the ridge, a bell in the temple valley began to ring for the evening rite. A congregation was gathering in a hall of pale marble to hear a high priest speak. He would smile as he spoke. His voice would be very calm. He would be counting the days, in that voice, to a burial he did not yet know whose. Master healer Silwyn arrived at Silverhold on a gray morning with sleet on her cloak and a leather case of instruments that had not been unpacked in 9 years, 50 winters. Hair the color of new iron. She had trained 3 healers who now sat on the council of the academy. She did not speak until she had unwrapped every tool and laid it in order along a clean linen. Then she looked up at the assembled elders and at Kale Draven at the back of the hall and at Allara Vain beside him, and she said one line before she began, I do not answer to a temple. I answer to a body. Bring me the body, which was, Allara would think later, the single most beautiful sentence she had ever heard another woman speak. The examination took 3 days. Silwyn worked in a stone chamber beneath the courthouse. Allara was permitted to assist, which meant she stood at Silwyn's elbow with a clean cloth and a steady stomach and watched a master healer do in a morning what no wolf healer in Silverhold had ever agreed to do in 3 years. Silwyn mapped the old fractures on Lady Alira's skeleton first. Old, because Allara had been in the ground 3 winters. Careful, because the bones told a story a fever could not have written. There were no old fractures on Allara. There was nothing on Allara but a woman who had been poisoned and then labored to death while a priest laid a hand on her forehead. Silwyn drew blood salts from Alira's exhumed marrow with a small silver needle. She sniffed. She set the salts against a strip of temple parchment coated in the plant reagents the Academy used for such things. The parchment went brown at the edges. Nightshade bloom, Alara's throat closed, a moon-hour dose, enough to kill a small pack. Then Silwyn turned to Lady Seraphine Blackwood. Seraphine had been dead only weeks, so her body still had a great deal to say. Silwyn counted 7 old fractures, 3 ribs, a left wrist, a right collarbone, a hairline in the jaw, a radial break at the forearm that had healed into a lump the size of a robin's egg. All of them at various ages, each of them a small dark record of a marriage. Silwyn did not raise her voice. She did not narrate. She did not perform. She simply worked, which was worse and better and truer than any preacher on a marble pulpit. At the end of the 2nd day, she stood back from the table and washed her hands in silver water and dried them on clean linen and turned to Elder Ragnar Stormhold. Elder, Master Healer. The Blackwood woman died of a liver rupture at parturition. The liver had been damaged by both blunt trauma over a period of months and by a chemical insult delivered orally within the last 30 days of life. That chemical insult was pennyroyal, black cohosh, and tansy, at concentrations no midwife would prescribe to a woman that far along in her carrying. The dose was calculated to kill her pregnancy. It was not calibrated to spare her. A person with knowledge of these plants would have known that. Any healer, any midwife, any academy graduate. She paused. She looked up at the vaulted ceiling. Any temple librarian with access to the mooncraft archives. Elder Ragnar closed his eyes. Then he opened them, and the old wolf who sat inside the old man came up to the surface. Bring the priest. Allara stood at Silwyn's elbow with a cloth still in her hand. She did not move for a moment. She was aware of Kale at the back of the chamber, of Roran at the door, of Lady Morwenna Blackwood seated on a low bench, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the far wall, dry as bone. She was also aware of a small, quiet, terrible thing inside her own chest. Not triumph, not relief. Something older and more useful than either. the certainty of a healer at the end of a long correct diagnosis. She looked at Master Healer Silwyn. Silwyn looked back at her, just once. A small nod, professional to professional. The nod one healer gave another when both had walked, together, into a room the world had said they were too small to enter. That nod was, Allara understood, the first credential she had ever been given by a member of the Academy. She would carry it for the rest of her life. The rest of the day passed in a blur of paperwork and sealed testimony, and Elder Ragnar's clerk writing very fast. Allara did not speak much. She did not need to. The body had spoken. The bones had spoken. The parchment had gone brown at the edges and told the last truth Allara Draven would ever get to tell. That night, back at the inn where Elder Ragnar had ordered rooms held for them, Kale found her sitting alone at the small window. She was watching the temple bell tower. The lamps of the tower had been lit at their usual hour, but no bell had rung for the evening rite. Because there was no high priest to ring it, he sat down beside her without asking. She said, "He is done. Not yet. He knows he will make one more move." What move? Kale was quiet for a long time. He did not look at her. He looked at the tower. He will try to save himself in the only place he still has a voice. The hall. The hall. She nodded slowly. Then we prepare for the hall. He turned his head. He looked at her. The lamplight fell warm on the side of his face. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. "Allara, yes, whatever happens in that hall, whatever he tries, I want you to know something. Tell me, you did not fail Lady Seraphine. You did not fail my Luna. You did not fail any woman you have ever put your hands on. You have been carrying a weight that was never yours. Silwyn has said it in a chamber under a courthouse tonight. Tomorrow the hall will hear her say it out loud. I will hear it out loud. And I want you to hear it now, in this room, from the man who has watched you carry it for 3 moons and has not known how to help you set it down." She could not speak. He did not ask her to. He only reached across the small space between them and took her hand and held it, not as a mate, not as an alpha, as a witness. The one thing every healer, in the end, most needs to be given. She let him hold it. Outside, the tower stayed silent. Inside, a fire burned low, and the last night before the trial passed in a small room over a valley that was, without knowing it yet, already Kale Draven's again. They tried Malachi Vorn in the High Hall of Silverhold 2 days later. The hall was too full. Half of Iron Fang had ridden in. The gallery ran with dark cloaks and dark eyes. Allara sat in the second row, with Old Mother Bryn on one side of her and Lady Morwenna Blackwood on the other. Morwenna held the little green journal in her lap. She held it as though it were the last living thing she had. Kale Draven sat at the front, on the alpha bench, on the seat that had been empty for 3 winters and formally forbidden to him by a writ Malachi himself had drafted. He sat there in black leather and the Draven silverwork collar. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence spoke for him. Because a hall full of wolves who had spent 18 years being told an alpha king was broken were now looking at an alpha king who plainly was not, which was, it in itself, a testimony no priest could argue with. Malachi Vorn was brought in the deep gray of the temple, his stole gone, his hands bound in a thin chain of silvered rope. He walked as though the rope did not matter. His face was composed. His eyes were quiet. He was a man who had planned 3 careers of speeches and now intended to give the finest one of his life. Elder Ragnar read the charges, administering banned abortifacient herbs to a bonded Luna in her 3rd trimester of carrying, resulting in her death. Adulterous conduct with a bonded Luna in violation of temple oath. Suspected administration of nightshade bloom to Luna Allara Draven in the winter of her death. Suspected forbidden mooncraft in the fashioning and placement of a runed dark creature inside the skull of the Alpha King of Iron Fang. Every charge landed in the hall like a stone into a well. Malachi smiled at the last one. Small, tolerant. As though the elder had suggested he had stolen the moon itself. Elder Stormhold. With respect. Fictions, Master Healer Silwyn has provided physical evidence for the first 3. Master Healer Silwyn is a woman with her own quarrels with the temple. I am shocked, though not surprised, that she would seize the chance. Elder Ragnar did not answer that. He looked to the prosecutor at the front. A younger elder named Corin, a wolf who had never smiled in public in his life. Corin rose. He put Seraphine's journal into evidence. He read 3 passages aloud, in his flat and terrible voice, in which a young Luna had written the name of a high priest and the doses of 3 herbs and the words, "I am so frightened." Malachi did not move. Corin put the drawings of the beetle's runes into evidence. He put Master Healer Silwyn's report into evidence. He called Lady Morwenna Blackwood, who did not weep and who did not embellish, and who told the hall that her daughter-in-law had come to her with bruises and with a broken wrist and with a name. Then he called Allara. She rose. She walked to the witness stand. She did not look at Kale, because if she looked at Kale, she would be strong for the wrong reason, and she wanted to be strong for the only reason that mattered. Truth in the room. Not affection at her back, Corin asked her one question, and only one. Mistress Vain, in your professional opinion, on the basis of your examination and Master Healer Silwyn's, could you have saved Lady Seraphine Blackwood on the night she died? No. Why not? Because by the time she reached my table, she was already dying of a poison she had been given three weeks earlier by a man she trusted, and of a torn liver that had been softening under a fist she was bonded to for 2 winters. I did what any healer would have done, and it was too late by the time she was mine. I have carried the guilt of that too late for weeks. I would like to give it back now. To the men it belongs to, she turned. She looked at Lord Thorn Blackwood, who was in the 2nd row in wolf chains. She looked at Malachi Vorn. You put your hands on her, Lord Thorn. You put your poison in her, High Priest. I did not kill Lady Seraphine. You killed her together. You are simply not brave enough to sit in the same row. The hall breathed as one animal. Malachi Vorn rose, slowly. Chain and all, may I speak, Elder? You may. May I speak plainly? You may. His voice was warm. It was the voice he had used from the pulpit for 2 decades. It was so lovely to listen to. It was the loveliness that had always been the trick, Elder Stormhold. Brothers, sisters, this healer, this poor human healer, has been cornered into a story she cannot escape, and in her fear she has reached for the largest villain she can name. I understand her. I forgive her. I would forgive her 100 times. But you cannot found a verdict on a frightened woman and a mother-in-law's grief. And you cannot convict a high priest of Iron Fang on the drawings of an insect scratched onto a page in a mountain kitchen. He turned. Slowly. He looked directly at Kale Draven, Alpha King. Kale did not answer. Alpha King. I have prayed at your bedside. I have wept at your Luna's grave. I have carried a kingdom for you through 18 winters of your affliction. I have loved this pack. I have loved you, Kale Draven, who had not been permitted to answer a high priest inside this hall since he was 19 years old, opened his mouth. Malachi, the hall drew its breath. Alpha King, I have listened to your voice for a very long time. Kale's throat was still rough. It made the words heavier. I have listened to it inside my own skull when I could hear nothing else, because you were the last voice I heard clearly, on the 3rd morning of the mine, when you put your hand on my head and told me I was cursed. That voice has lived inside me since I was 19. I know it very well. I know its warm places. I know where it lies. Malachi's face did not move. So when you say you have loved me, High Priest, I would like you to know. I have heard that too, and I have decided it is not true. The hall held. Malachi's smile stayed, but something behind his eyes shifted, and for the 2nd time in the length of this reckoning, Allara saw the card player's blank half-second appear behind his face. He lifted his bound hands. He set them, very deliberately, over his heart. He began to hum, softly, almost sweetly. A 3-note figure that dropped and rose and dropped again. Old Mother Bryn's head came up beside Allara like a hound scenting fire. Allara, I hear it. That is a moon-binding cadence. Girl, I know. He is opening a portal in the middle of the hall. I know. The stone under the witness stand grew suddenly warm. The air over Malachi's shoulders bent, just slightly, beneath the way heat bends over a summer road. A very faint circle of pale silver light began to draw itself into the flagstones around him. His humming grew. He was going to walk out of the room, not through the doors, through the floor, which meant he had built himself an escape into his own trial. Which meant he had known, from the moment Silwyn touched the first bone, that a verdict was going to fall, which meant a high priest of Iron Fang, in the middle of a full temple, had prepared a piece of forbidden mooncraft to save his own skin, which was, itself, a conviction if anyone in the hall lived long enough to say it out loud. Allara moved, because she had been the one who studied the beetle. She had been the one who traced its runes. She had been the one who spent 3 nights reading the small, stolen pages of Alira's old herbal, which she had brought with her in her cloak this morning without knowing why. Except that she had learned this month to trust the itch at the back of her neck. She reached into her cloak. She drew out a small pouch of coarse silver salt and a stoppered vial of pale glycerine oil. Silver salt broke a moon binding. Wormwood oil unmade a rune. Every academy healer knew it. No high priest expected a human midwife to. She threw the salt in a wide arc across Malachai's feet. She followed it with the oil. The pale circle in the flagstones flickered. The humming caught in his throat like a hook. The circle did not close. Malachai Vorn's eyes widened, not with fear, with calculation. Because the circle had not fully broken. It had only stuttered. He would have another breath, maybe two. He drew that breath. He began the cadence again. Kale Draven stood up. He did not shout. Because an alpha king who had earned his voice back 3 weeks ago did not need to shout. He had spent 18 years learning how much a small sound could carry. He had spent 3 weeks relearning how to weaponize it. And he had one thing in his throat now that Malachai Vorn had spent 18 years making sure could never happen inside this hall alpha command. It came out of him low. It came out of him even. It came out of him aimed, Kneal. The word did not land in the ear. It landed in the spine. Every wolf in the hall felt it move through them. Not a compulsion. A recognition. The old bone-deep knowledge every shifter carried since birth of the voice that was allowed to name them. It rolled across the marble like a bell struck underwater, and every wolf who was not Malachai Vorn braced their knees against it because it had not been aimed at them. It had been aimed at one man, Malachai Vorn's legs folded. Not gracefully. Not by choice. His knees struck stone with a sound the whole hall heard. The humming choked off. The pale circle in the flagstones flared once and went out. The temple silence rushed back in. For one held heartbeat, no one in the room moved. Because they were all doing the same arithmetic. A cursed king could not carry Alpha Command. Alpha Command required a whole throat. A whole throat required a whole wolf. A whole wolf required a soul. The temple had spent 18 years telling the pact was broken beyond repair. The temple had lied. Every wolf in the hall did that math in the space of one breath. And every wolf in the hall arrived at the same answer at the same moment. Allara felt it settle across the room, like weather changing. She had seen crowds turn before. She had never seen a crowd turn on a single syllable. Kale did not sit down. Roran. Alpha, take him. Roran Ashfell was already moving. He crossed the hall in 5 strides. 2 more Ashfell wolves moved with him. They lifted Malachai Vorn under both arms. His mouth was still open. No sound came out, not from the command. From the fact that a hall of wolves was watching him fail to escape his own trap, and a high priest with a bound throat inside a full temple had only one currency left, and it was silence, and he did not have enough of it to buy the rest of his career. Elder Ragnar Stormhold rose. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to, by the authority of this council and the ancient right of the Pax of Iron Fang. On the count of murder, by chemical means of Lady Seraphine Blackwood. On the count of murder by chemical means of Luna Allara Draven. On the count of the practice of forbidden mooncraft. On the count of the assault by mooncraft upon the person of Alpha King Kale Draven. Malachai Vorn, formerly High Priest of Iron Fang, is sentenced to lifelong confinement in the vaults beneath. His name is struck from the temple rolls. His voice is struck from the pulpit. His writings are ordered destroyed. He turned. He looked at Lord Thorn Blackwood, on the count of the assault, over the term of a bonded marriage, upon the person of Lady Seraphine Blackwood, and on the count of contributory homicide by that assault. Lord Thorn Blackwood is sentenced to 10 winters of hard labor in Silverhold mines. Thorn did not fight. He had gone gray in the face. He looked more than anything tired. Elder Ragnar turned last to Allara, Mistress Vain. All charges brought against you are dismissed. On the record, this council offers you the formal apology of the Pack of Iron Fang. It will be inscribed in the roll of elders. She had thought, since the temple summons, that she would cry when this moment came. She did not. Because the apology was already too small for what it had cost her, and she did not have room for it and grief at the same time. She only inclined her head. She said the correct words. She looked at Kale Draven at the front of the hall, and she understood in one thin second that this was the first time in her whole life a room had said out loud that she had been right. She was going to have to learn a new posture for the rest of her life. This one was too new to wear yet. Outside the hall, the sky over Silverhold was pale and clean. The wind smelled of snow. Kale walked out beside her with the Ashfell pack behind them, and no one on the temple steps blocked their path, and no one on the courtyard stones lowered their eyes. The kingdom had, in the space of one syllable, remembered its Alpha King. She would think of it in later years as the moment Iron Fang exhaled. Snow came in the second week after the trial. It came in a soft, slow fall that muffled the pines. Kale and Allara stood on the porch of Ravenspire and watched it fill the courtyard. He had a mug of dark tea in his hand. She had her medical satchel over her shoulder, because she had been up before dawn with a difficult labor down in the village and had not yet unbuckled it. He said, "Allara?" She said, "Yes. Do you remember the night we sat at the hearth? The night after the beetle? When I told you I wanted to ask you a question. When it was over, I remember. It is over." She did not turn to look at him, because she was going to cry if she looked at him, and she did not want to cry on the first morning of her real life. She kept her eyes on the courtyard and the falling snow. "Ask, Allara Vain. Yes, I did not marry you for a healer. I did not marry you for a rescue. I did not marry you because a council of old men shoved us at each other in the same afternoon. I married you because a high priest at a marble pulpit told a kingdom that a human woman had no right to touch a wolf, and I hated that man before I hated anyone else in the world, and I would have married anyone he denounced. That was true 4 moons ago, I know. It is not true anymore." She did not turn. "Go on. I would like to know if you would stay. Not because a council will send you back to a mine if you leave. Not because a writ requires it. Not because I still need my ear cleaned twice a week. Because you want to. Because I want you to. Because I have not, in a very long time, wanted anything as clearly as I want you, at this hearth in the morning." She did not answer for a long time, because the answer was already in her chest, and she had to wait for it to become a shape she could give with her mouth. "Kale? Yes, I have been chosen once before. By a man who married me for orchard land and never once looked at me the way you looked at me across a jar of silver wine. I have decided, sometime this winter, that I am not going to be chosen for that kind of reason again. I understand. I am not finished. I am sorry. I have decided that I will only stay in a house I choose. This is a house I choose. You are a hearth I choose. If you want a wife, I am your wife. If you want a mate, I am your mate. If you want an alpha's Luna, that is a longer conversation, because I am not a wolf, and I do not know what a human Luna looks like in this kingdom yet. But we can find out." He was very quiet for a long moment, Allara. "Yes, I will spend the rest of my life finding out." She turned then. Because she did not care if she cried anymore, she let him see her face. He set the mug down on the porch rail. He took her cold hand in his warm one. He did not kiss her. He pressed his forehead to hers, wolf to healer, the way Roran had pressed his to Kale's on the day the world tilted. It was, she understood, the way his people said the largest thing they had. He said very quietly, into the small space between them, "I chose you. I chose you." The winters that followed were the making of a kingdom and of a marriage, and of a small, dark-haired boy neither of them yet knew how to imagine. Kale rebuilt the temple. Not the building. The office. He unwound Malachi Vorn's power one line at a time. He appointed a rota of priestesses and priests from the Northern Healer's Hall. No single voice held the pulpit longer than 12 moons. No high priest could give a sermon on the death of a Luna without a healer present. Elder Ragnar remarked dryly in council one afternoon that this was the first law in Iron Fang's history written to prevent one specific man. Allara opened a healing house in Silverhold. She staffed it with 3 of old Mother Bryn's granddaughters and 1 of Master Silwen's academy students. She wrote a paper on the recognition of quiet damage in bonded mates. She sent it to the academy. The academy printed it. Every midwife in the kingdom carried a copy inside her satchel within a year. The paper began, in her plain hand, with a single line the academy left unedited. "If a woman flinches when her mate enters the room, look at her ribs before you look at her belly." Kale, at his own quiet insistence, went to the academy the second winter to study beast healing under Master Silwen. He was the oldest student on the floor and the most silent, which the young students at first mistook for the old rumor. It was not. It was concentration. He wanted to know why a rune could bind a small living creature to a large one. He wanted to know how many other men in the kingdom might, this very moment, be carrying a small dark thing behind their ears. He set up a screening clinic in the second year with Allara. Between them they cleared 11 cases, none as old as his, all at least the work of the same hand, which was Malachi Vorn's hand, which had reached farther than the vaults could ever hold him accountable for. Which meant Allara Vain and Kale Draven spent a great deal of the second year traveling to small pack houses in the far country, opening ears, and giving men back their voices. There were widows in that country who wept when their sons spoke to them for the first time in a decade. There were wolves in that country who tried to give Kale Draven their throats. He would not take them. He always said the same thing. He always said it in the same steady, hoarse, patient voice. I did not save you, she did. And you did not have to stay quiet. You only had to be listened to. The next man who tells you your pain is not real is the enemy. Not the pain, which became. By the 3rd year, a saying at the healer's hall, they came home from the last of those trips in the spring of the 3rd year. She was tired. She had realized in the 2nd month of that trip and told no one, carrying. She told him at their own hearth on the first night home. She was very afraid when she told him, because a lifetime of watching Lunas die on tables did not leave a healer neutral about her own belly. She had done every calculation. She had planned every fallback. She had written a birth plan and sealed it in the same flagstone under which she had once hidden the drawings of a beetle's back. And she was still afraid. Which she told him too. Kale put his hand on hers. Allara, you have opened up 2 graves and 11 skulls and a high priest's career in 3 winters. If any woman in Iron Fang is going to survive her own labor, it is going to be you. We will call for Silwen. We will call for Bryn. We will call for the best midwives in the kingdom. Roran will be at the gate. Half the Ashfell pack will be on the ridge. If your body fails, I will not blame you. Only bring me the child if you can. If you cannot bring me the child, bring me you. She cried at that. She had been holding it for 100 miles. The labor came in the last week of winter. Old Mother Bryn attended. Master Healer Silwen attended. Kale sat outside the door with his back against the wood the way a good mate did in this kingdom. Roran Ashfell sat with him for 11 hours. Neither man spoke. She labored 20 hours. She almost gave herself over to fear at the 16th. She did not, because a stubborn woman on a table who had once faced down a high priest could still hear her own voice at the 16th hour of a labor. And she reminded herself, in that voice, that she had too much work left to die today. The pup, when he came, was a small dark-haired boy with his father's steady mouth and his mother's careful eyes. He roared at his first breath, loud enough that the Ashfell wolves out on the ridge heard him and howled once, the old high sound that told a kingdom a bloodline had held. They named him Torin Draven, not Draven Vain. Kale offered. She refused. In this kingdom, a pup carried the alpha name. In this kingdom, that was a shield. She had spent enough of her life being clever about shields to know when to accept one. When Silwen finally left her side and the room empty of everyone but Kale, he sat down on the edge of the bed. He looked at his son. He looked at his wife. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. Allara, yes, you gave me my voice back 3 winters ago. You gave me my kingdom back the winter after. You gave me my son this morning. She was too tired to cry properly. She managed a small sound instead, a laugh, a breath. Something with a smile in it. You are welcome, Alpha King. He bent his forehead to hers. I chose you, I chose you. The pup slept between them. Outside, the wind moved in the pines. A single lamp burned in the window of Ravenspire Fortress, and any traveler on the ridge road that night, looking up through the trees, might have seen it and thought only that some quiet family lived up there, and never once guessed the weight of what that lamp had cost, which was, perhaps, the finest thing about it. There is a lesson under this story, and I want to lay it out plainly before we close. Kale Draven spent 18 winters believing a lie about himself. Elders, a kingdom, a high priest, and in the end his own inside voice all told him the same lie. That his silence was punishment, that his losses were his fault, that his affliction was proof of his unworth. You know what the deepest cruelty of that lie was? It was not the words spoken from the pulpit. It was that Kale, alone at Ravenspire on long winter nights, had come to say the words back to himself in the dark. That is what a long lie does to a good man. It teaches him to become his own accuser. I want you to think about the men in your life, the good men, the quiet ones, the ones who have gone very still around a certain subject. The friend who does not speak of his first marriage, the brother who does not talk about the year his son stopped calling, the father who never explains why he left that job, the neighbor who nods when you ask if he is well. Some of them are carrying something small and dark that was put there a long time ago by a voice they trusted, and no one has ever thought to look. That is the first thing this story asks of you, to look, not to fix, not to lecture, to look, to sit down with the quiet man in your life and ask him one honest question and then be quiet long enough to hear the answer. You do not have to be a master healer to do this. Allara Vain was not. She was a country midwife with borrowed books and steady hands. What she had that no one else in the kingdom had was the decision to look again after a whole room had told her not to. That decision is small. It is available to you today. It costs nothing but your nerve, and it can save a life. Here is the second thing. Justice comes late. It came 18 winters late for Kale Draven. It came weeks too late for Lady Seraphine. It came 3 winters too late for Luna Allara. It will come late for you too, in the way it comes late for all of us. That is not a reason not to reach for it. That is the reason. Late justice is still justice. A voice restored at 37 is still a voice. A truth spoken in a full hall after a decade of whispers is still the truth. Do not let anyone in your life, do not let anyone reading this, tell you that too much time has passed to reach for what is true. Elder Ragnar Stormhold was 68 winters old when he leaned forward on that high seat and said the words, "This is not your hall today." It was the bravest sentence he ever spoke, and he waited most of his life to speak it. If there is a truth you have been waiting for permission to say, consider this your permission. There is one last thing I want to tell you before the fire goes down. There is a small memorial in the far country of Iron Fang. It sits beside a village healing house that Allara Vain opened in the 6th year of Kale's reign. It is a single stone, no bigger than a hearthstone. There is nothing on it but a line the villagers themselves carved into the granite one summer without asking anyone's permission. The line reads, "Tell me where it hurts." That is the whole story. That is the whole trick. 4 words. That is what a country healer said to a cursed king in the middle of the night when no one in the world had bothered to ask him. That is what a broken kingdom needed to hear for 18 winters and did not. That is what the good men in your life are waiting to hear right now in this ordinary week from whoever loves them enough to ask. I would like to ask you something before you go. Who in your life has gone quiet on a subject they used to speak about? Who is the man in your family, or your street, or your church pew, who has gone very still around a certain year of his life? What would it cost you to sit down with him this week and ask him one honest question, and then be quiet long enough to hear the answer? Tell me in the comments. Tell me about the man who stopped speaking of a certain time. Tell me about the friend you noticed had gone still. Tell me about the moment you were the one who finally looked and what you found when you did. There is a man reading this today who is waiting for one Allara Vain to sit down at his table and simply say, "Tell me where it hurts." Your story in the comments might be the story that reaches him, and if the story of Allara Vain and Kale Draven meant something to you, if the small jar and the silver wine reminded you of someone you love, stay with us. There are more stories at this hearth, there are more silences waiting to be broken, and there is always, always room for one more good night. Sleep well. Look this week at the quiet man in your life. He is worth the looking.